Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading and examine some questions that extend our learning from the sermon on Sunday. Today I'm joined by Rivenbark and Sharon Schwartz, and we are looking at a passage from Luke chapter 23, verses 43 through 46. And it says, "By this time it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, 'Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands.' And with these words, he breathed his last." So when I read these words that Jesus breathed his last breath, I couldn't help but think about the irony of it. You know, the first time we read about God's breath was when God breathed life into man.
Right. That's a really good observation. We see where he breathed life into man physically, but also spiritually. You think about breathing and breath, and if you're that close to somebody that you're breathing on them or in them, that's pretty intimate. And we see that throughout this whole scenario, this breath. So the fact that God began man's life with breath, and then Jesus gave his last breath on the cross is pretty significant. It's a powerful picture of grace and love that God has shared with to create us from the beginning, to breathe into us life, and then his son Jesus on the cross gave his last breath. Pretty powerful.
Yeah. And I think we have to be aware of that. Now, you said something funny to me. You said somebody's close enough to breathe on you. It's pretty intimate.
Yeah.
It's either intimate or intrusive.
Or intrusive.
Yeah, one of those two things.
Depends on the source.
That's exactly right.
And if they need a mint.
Well, I don't care. There's some folks that breast mine, but they just too close, right?
But I mean, it's a joke because I like that point. You're right. I would say for probably 99.9% of humanity, if they're breathing on me, you're way too close.
Right.
But there are people that I'm in relationship with that if they're that close to me, that's the comfort zone.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
I would agree. So when Jesus stopped breathing, so you and I can breathe, right? That's a pretty profound thought, right, Sharon?
Absolutely. You know, God, the first we hear about him, he breathed life into Adam. It's what created, what formed, made him a man. And the last time he breathed, but he didn't breathe into dust, which is what Adam was made out. He breathed grace into us. And I think that's beautiful, the thought that his last breath he still was giving to us. When I think about forgiveness, God gave us the incredible gift of forgiveness at an incredible cost. And I wonder why we struggle so much to forgive others. I mean, you would think it would come as natural as breathing. Here's a fun fact. The current Guinness World Record for the longest voluntary breath hold is 24 minutes and 37.36 seconds. I wonder if he's a diver. You know, I know in the Bahamas, divers hold the breath for a long time.
Yeah, well, there is, I know some of the SEALs can do similar things because they have to, I think they call it free diving. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's the word. And because the thing is, it's not the diving is the problem, right? It's the coming back up. That's the real problem, that they can only come back up levels at the time.
Right.
So their body, anyway.
So I wonder what the Navy record is. That would be
I would assume that this is still the record, yeah.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
You know, and holding your breath for an extended period of time, if you've not been trained and medically approved, can be dangerous. But I think people, especially believers who are faced with challenges of forgiveness, are fighting their breath. When they're holding bitterness, it affects our body. It affects everything we do. When the breath of God is in you, the urge to forgive will become stronger, just like we need breath to get stronger.
Yeah. Can you give me an example, either of you, maybe of a time when you were holding your breath, right? You struggled to forgive somebody?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just the reality of it. I'm thinking of a couple examples, and I want to be careful.
I know. You don't want to give too many
give them
details.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah. One.
They ain't listening.
You're probably right. Yeah. One involved, this is probably not going to surprise you, one involved a person who owed me a lot of money. At the time, it was a lot of money for our household. We made sacrifices to put this out for somebody else who was in a crisis with the promise that it would come back, and it didn't. Mm-hmm. And even to the point where the individuals act like it never happened. Mm. And when we confronted them, it was like, sorry, we can't. And honestly, and I didn't even realize it, it built up a resentment to me, deep inside. And
probably not, if I had to guess, probably not just to that person, but it probably affected other.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Other relationships and scenarios in my life. And I'm talking about years later, it was one of those things where the Holy Spirit just gets to you and says, okay, it's time to deal with this.
Just let it go.
Yeah. Where I genuinely forgave. I mean, as if it never happened, and tried to treat those people from that point forward as if it never happened. And it was like not only a weight off your shoulder, but like taking a deep breath, to do like that. And so forgiveness, as it relates to this analogy of breathing, is a significant thing, to let it go, catch your breath.
Yeah, that's like Frozen. Let it go.
Let it go.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. And I think closer the person is to you, for me, harder it is to forgive. If you feel like someone that you really love and trust has betrayed you, to me, in some ways, that's harder to forgive than if you had done, or a stranger had done it to me, but there are too many to mention and wouldn't want to,
So have you ever forgiven someone, Jay, you talked about how it was a release for you, and you felt like you could breathe again, where it just changed everything? Yeah,
it's when the biggest time that came to my mind when we were looking at this was, I felt like, and it's not the breathing in that I felt, it was the exhaling, and I was sharing this with Evelyn, that I'm asthmatic, and the breathing in is not, you think that's what it is, but it's not. It's the exhaling, to getting all that out. And that was the feel of release, that now I can let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Several years ago, when my son was, I don't know, probably 10, 11 years old, we went out in March on our boat because it was a pretty day. The water's still super cold. And we'd been out there probably 30 minutes, and he kept saying, I want to get in the water, I want to get in the water. It's like, the water is too cold. You will freeze in there. And I had turned around to do something, and he again asked me for like the 58th time. He said, I want to jump in the water. I was like, fine, if you, before I could say fine, because if you do, and I heard, boom,
he just heard fine.
And he went right down in the, cold water, and it seemed like he was never going to come up. And when he did, he goes, but that has often reminded me, that's a lot of the way forgiveness is, though. We jump into things sometimes that create a crisis for ourselves. We don't want to acknowledge it or admit it, but when we do, we come up and get that gasp of air. And then he needed us to get him out of the water. And there were still things that had to be done to get him dry, get some different clothes on. And oftentimes forgiveness is that way. It gives us that breath, that gasp, but I can breathe, I can live a little bit longer, but then there's follow-up. And I think sometimes we miss the follow-up part of forgiveness, right. The consequences.
Yeah. I think there's only been 2 or 3 times where I felt like I struggled to forgive somebody. I can usually forgive somebody pretty quick. All right, we're going to try this again. I'm a break it and fix it kind of person, so I'm fine. If it gets broken, we'll try it again. I'm rarely going to find myself in a situation where I can't forgive. Now, I will exclude you, right? Now, I will, I'll put you over here in a different room so that I don't have to worry about it. But I'm not going to walk around going,
I don't like him.
No, I'm just not going to be that, that kind of person. But the 2 or 3 times where that forgiveness was a challenge, it is a relief. I mean, it just is. It's a relief. Forgiveness is described so many ways, and one of them has to be a relief, not for the person that's being forgiven, but for the forgiver. It's like,
no, because probably the one being forgiven doesn't care.
Sometimes they don't even
May
know.
not even know.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't even know. Zig Ziglar used to tell a story about this woman at work, and she was the head secretary, and her boss, they had an hour lunch, and he had gone to lunch, and he was gone. He came in late, and often when we make a mistake, the way we hide it is we catch something at somebody else. And so she comes in, and he comes in, and he says, "Have you got my letters ready?" And she was like, "Well, no, I hadn't had time to finish them." "Well, what are you doing?" And well, I need them by, within an hour. And he goes in his office and slams the door, and she's like, "What kind of a sorry person is he?" And he's gone late on his lunch, and I'm over here working. And so she grabs the letters, she goes down to the secretary pool, and she starts passing them out, fussing at all the ladies. "Y'all got to get this done. Why ain't you got it done already?" And one of the ladies in there gets mad. "Who does she think she is? She sits up there and don't work. When she gets in a bind, she comes down here and passes it off to us." And one of the ladies, she's mad. So she goes home, and her son has been outside playing, and he's ripped his pants, and she's still mad about what's happened at work. And she comes in, and, "How many times have I told you not to, wear those jeans out and play?" And da-da-da-da-da. And she's giving him a hard time. And the boy gets mad and goes out and slams the door, and said, "That crazy woman, said she ain't here all day. I got to take care of myself." And then when she comes home, she's fussing at me, and the cat walks in front of him, and he hauls off and kicks the cat. And the motto of the story was, the cat got kicked because the man was late for lunch.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. Is it just, we often the repercussions.
Absolutely.
Domino effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
So to extend the metaphor, like dead people don't breathe. The Bible uses this description for those who are lost. In Ephesians 2:1, it says, "And you were dead in trespasses and sins." Is it really easier for Christians who are spiritually alive to forgive others than it is for unbelievers to forgive?
Well, I answer this way. In theory and theology, yes.
Yeah.
In practicality, maybe not so much.
When we put on the Jesus,
Yes.
then it is. Yeah. But when human is overriding, the human side is overriding the Holy Spirit, and it does.
I think that's true of almost everything. A lot of times, as we were talking about this a few weeks back, we talked about sanctification. It's a process, right? And you constantly have to be taking it off and putting it on, taking this. Okay, I didn't know I had that on me. Still, I got to take it off. You constantly be thinking about it. The danger, the answer is, really is yes, because Jesus helps us forgive. But the problem comes in when we know it, right? When we recognize it, and then we don't do it. I think believers can become even more difficult to forgive because the Holy Spirit is, all right, you need to forgive, and then you choose not to, your heart hardens.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And if your heart's going to be hardened to the Holy Spirit, it's certainly going to be hardened to other people.
Yeah, I agree with
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading from the One Year Bible.